Yo, man, welcome to my channel. You might be wondering who I am and what I'm doing here. Well, my name is Yusuf, and I'm a yeoman. And today, I want to give you an overview of the kinds of things that I want to share in this channel and the journey I hope that we can grow together on. Still tweaking my setup here, so I appreciate any feedback. I can make this embedded within the screen, but it's a little bit easier just to record the monitor. So let me know how you can see the image quality and if you think that I should do a split screen. But hopefully this is an interactive way to share ideas. Well, first of all, we got a definition of a yeoman. And this is a dictionary definition. It's a person who assists somebody, who works with a higher service or for a higher purpose and good service. It's honest, it's full of integrity. A yeoman's work, another description of it, is something that's very good, very hard. Oops, probably in here because this microphone was down there. Sorry about that. I guess I will start over and hopefully those first few minutes I'll just trim out later. All right. So from the top. Yo, man. What's up? Welcome to the channel. You might be wondering who I am and what's a yeoman. Here's a yeoman. My name's Yusuf. So in this channel, I want to talk about the things that it takes to live well in this world, to solve the big issues of environment and how we relate with one another. Today, I'm going to share some of my inspiration, some of my background, and why I'm really excited about this word called a yeoman and what it means. You probably haven't heard of it. It used to be a lot more popular back in the day. But it was often used to describe somebody who assists another person, who owns and cultivates a small farm, and somebody who performs great and loyal service. There's another definition of it, something that's very good, very hard, and valuable work that somebody does in support of something higher. And Thomas Jefferson, one of our great founding fathers, he really held the yeoman farmer in high regard. It was seen as the embodiment of the ideal American, that honest, virtuous, and hardworking, independent spirit was something that Jefferson really admired. And it was from that place of strength that the yeoman gave back to society. Because they could take care of their own and they weren't dependent on really complex structures, they were less likely to be corrupted. And as the saying goes, you reap what you sow. It's very true. What we plant is what we harvest. And you can't escape that on a farm. This is probably can't read it. Just something I clipped describing the yeoman farmer. It was used a lot to describe small farms, especially in the South. Well, anyway, in Jefferson's Notes on Virginia, he's got a beautiful poem. Well, regular prose sounds like poetry. Those who labor the earth are the chosen people of God, if ever he had chosen people, whose breasts he has made his particular deposit for substantial and genuine virtue. It is the focus in which he keeps alive that sacred fire, which otherwise might escape from the face of the earth. Corruption of morals in the mass of cultivators is a phenomena of which no age nor nation has furnished an example. It is the mark set on those who, not looking up to heaven, to their own soil and industry, as does the husbandman, for their subsistence, depend on it. For casualities and caprice of customers. This is an important one here. I'm even going to zoom in, highlight this. Dependence begets subservience, venality, and suffocates the germ of virtue and prepares fit tools for the designs of ambition. So that's a lot of words to say that the farmer, because their existence relies on their honest work, that they have to focus forward. And by focusing forward, that's how we keep our sacred fire alive. It's how we become connected to the divine. It's how we make this world into our own Garden of Eden. And when, with the saying here, dependence begets subservience, that's really powerful. If you're dependent on somebody else to survive, well, then you're going to have to cater to their will. But if you can provide for your own, if you're strong, if you have a very tight family and community that care for one another, then you're so much less likely to be corrupted and become vain and to assume that we can't make an impact in this world. Couldn't be the further thing from the truth. We can make a direct impact in this world. And as we go along, I want to show you a lot of these amazing examples. So let's go over to Monticello. So we're talking about Jefferson. Well, this is Jefferson's farm. Really beautiful place. You can see some of the different aspects on the farm. This really big terrace here with these high density crops going all around, herbs down here on the side. Of course, your eyes might be drawn to at first this nice house here. It's certainly beautiful. But if you look at other aspects of the farm, it's designed with the land and the climate in mind. So on the south side here, you have these vineyards and orchards, which will get warmer. If you look over here, another view of things, again, you see this really dense planting on the terrace. Just beautiful stuff. There are vineyards and orchards all along the hillsides. Just so much wisdom in this landscape. And just another beautiful photo. This terrace is huge, right? A lot of work. Fortunately, a lot of slave labor too, but nonetheless, it takes vision to execute something like that. And couldn't you just imagine on a slightly chilly, windy spring day, you come out here into this beautiful little garden house, just overlooking everything, those beautiful windows. I can't imagine how much great thinking was done right there. Now, Jefferson wasn't our only founding farmer. Washington, known as saying, as quoted here, he'd rather be on his farm than emperor of the world. And I think that's important. We need to have leaders that almost don't want to be leaders. Somebody who is expressing the virtue in their own life, in their own small sphere of family and land, that builds up those characteristics that make a great leader for a nation. Now, transition in just a little bit. I'm going to show you this guy. I'll talk a lot more about him in future videos, but this is Luther Burbank. He is the most amazing plant breeder I've ever known. Um, he's come up with more varieties and of plants than really anybody I know. Like the Shasta daisies here. He made spineless cactuses, thornless raspberries, white blackberry, all these sorts of things, and stuff that people thought were impossible. And the scientific community really didn't like his methods because he's really intuitive and didn't keep great notes. But nonetheless, his results speak for themselves. Now, there's another person I want to share with you. His name is P.A. Yeoman. And yes, that was his last name, but he was also a yeoman. He was out in Australia. This is one of the projects he was working on, I think somewhere in the 50s. He came up with this method of land planning to maximize water distribution on the land because we have all these resources around us. And if we can effectively understand how to integrate them together, you create a system with future benefits rather than degradation. And this was really important out in Australia. Even today, all sorts of drought, desertification, and just using these really simple, low-cost technologies like this here. You see this ditch, right? You just got a water board going across this ditch. So then it overflows down to the landscape, right? And you can see in this overhead how, imagine those same ditches going around like this, and then the water is permeating down. It's going around, it's permeating down, right? And there's all sorts of other places around the world who have been implementing these sorts of strategy, like this one in San Ricardo. I think that's somewhere in Central America. Richard Perkins was working on that. Unfortunately, I didn't include much of him in this video, but genius farmer. Anyway, there's this concept that Yeoman introduced called the scale of permanence, right? So anytime that you're approaching some sort of land management or you want to design, you want to think about all the stuff sort of in the framework of stuff that's more difficult to change. Sorry, let me just adjust that a little bit. Things that are more difficult to change on this vertical axis. And then things that are more permanent on this axis. So the hardest thing to change is the climate, then our land shape, then water, then our roads and trees and structures, subdivisions, and then the soil, right? And all these things come together in a lot of beautiful manifestations. So if you think about structures like Machu Picchu, goodness, they drastically changed the shape of their lands, but it was with foresight, and that was one of the reasons that allowed their culture to thrive until they didn't. And we'll talk about that in another video. But by structures like this, just reminds you that we can influence all these things, but it becomes more difficult. And so those biggest bottlenecks are what we need to address first when we go into any sort of land planning. And then you see things like this, these chinampas. See this a lot in Central America. Basically, they'll take a lake and make these mounded beds. I've done some of this myself, not to this extent, but so you get the water from underneath, and then you do plantings on the sides to hold in the slopes. And you still see this today too. This is somewhere, I think in Vietnam. Now, water is a very interesting, important resource. So you go to a place like Iraq here. This is the Fertile Crescent. This is Mesopotamia. These two rivers. This is the cradle of civilization. Yeah, you see some remnants of that vegetation in there, all these wetlands. But this whole thing used to be flooded and just filled with, this was paradise. This was paradise. But through poor agriculture practices, it has degraded. Degraded land, more people, what do you expect is going to happen? People are going to form these really rigid tribal identities and group associations, and you've seen a whole bunch of conflict there. But there's still some beautiful stuff in the Middle East. Um, this here is some of the what they call the marsh people that would live around Baghdad area here in the river deltas. This here's some land over in Syria near where my father's from. And you see these awesome terraces and contour plantings, and that reduces erosion. And these trees can be super long lived. Oh, sorry, I'm getting out of frame here. Adjust that. Forgive me as I work out the tweaks and kinks of this. No, I'll be much more efficient here after a few goes. Anyway, Syria, there's some beautiful ancient culture there, like this giant water wheel, ancient structure to distribute things. You go over to the Netherlands and you see all the canals and how they literally made land where the sea was. These giant dikes that were holding back all this water, right? 'Cause that's where the water line is under these houses. But just through really thoughtful, intentional planning, we can change, and we do change the shape of the earth. But it's got to be with a higher purpose in mind, and it has to be in a regenerative cycle, not an extractive, exploitive one. Now, in Holland, you see all these really amazing greenhouses, giant places, uh, and essentially like whole cities of greenhouses. It's quite amazing, and the produce in here is just massive. Obviously, they're known for their flowers as well, but this stuff it's not really new. A lot of the stuff that we're coming back to, people have been doing it for a long time. We've just become so fragmented in our understanding of how to interact with this world that we have to remember all these things we forgot. Just another shot here of this sort of greenhouse city. I'm really into architecture, so at some point we'll talk about, would it be nice to live in a greenhouse or have a greenhouse attached to your house? It's beautiful possibilities. Now, there's another book, great inspiration, called Farmers of 40 Centuries, and it's talking about in East Asia. A lot of these farms have been around for 4,000, 5,000 years, and it's because they viewed matter as sacred, right? All the soil and water that would wash and erode away from the field, they capture in all these terraces. And they would collect in canals and put it back in the fields. And so instead of having nutrient runoff, that's a valuable asset. They collect it and put it back. And since the sun's energy is always shining down, you can thrive for a really long time. Some polyculture plantings here with trees on the side and the high intensity vegetables underneath. This sort of technique is being implemented too by great farmers of today, like Jean-Martin Fortier at the Farm de Quatre-Temps in Quebec. He also wrote The Market Gardener. Here, you have all these alleys. I should change the color, but alleys of trees and perennials to help fight off bugs. And then you have your rows of vegetables all in between here. So, zooming in, right? You have all your close space and veggies, and then your perennials on the sides. It's just a beautiful place too, with ponds, and just love their family. Family is a really important thing, and it's awesome that a lot of the techniques and tools that we need are very family friendly. So this is Ben Hartman. He wrote the book The Lean Farm. I'll surely do a video on that here in the future, but just using these really cool tools. And this is the old farm, but it's beautiful, and it's all about providing what the customer wants, when they want it, how they want it, and minimizing the time from when you start production to when your customer gets it. It's all about minimizing steps and focusing on what is of high value. And so there's other people here like Curtis Stone, does similar stuff in rented land in the city, He owns some of his land now, but you don't need a lot of land. You don't even need to own the land to get involved with farming. It's all about observing from nature. And Sepp Holzer is a really big advocate for that. He's got this amazing farm out in Austria where you have these giant mountains and he's got all these water collection all along. Oh, I should have made that blue. All along. There's many more down the sides too. And he's able to grow like citrus and stuff in the Alps. It's just amazing. Uh, and you have places like Aquascape. Uh, Greg Whitscott, the pond guy. Uh, they're sort of modernizing a lot of these ecological systems just to have a natural swimming pool that doesn't need chemicals to sustain itself. Instead, you use plants on the side, and it's beautiful. And this is super important. Like this is the Aral Sea. I'm surprised how few people really know what happens here. I mean, this place here was the size of Lake Huron, but through the top of the watershed, through poor agriculture practices, should have had the year on here. But this is somewhere like 2015, and this was like 1960 or so ish. Should definitely put that in there, right? But the whole thing dried up. What happened? And how do we stop this from happening? Like, I don't want this to happen here. This is Lake Michigan. This is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And so I'll set out on this journey to try and figure out what the problems were and what we could do about it. Well, I spent some time researching these aquatic weeds called water milfoil that were developing herbicide resistance. It didn't make sense to me because they don't reproduce sexually nearly fast enough to accumulate the changes. And uh, that led me down to look into things like epigenetics, like our DNA. It's wrapped around like these spools, these histone proteins, really, really tight. And then our environment, it it activates it activates parts of the DNA and it turns things on and off, right? So when we're treating weeds with herbicide, we're just treating a symptom. We're not getting back to the source, right? And so I was looking on land and all sorts of other stuff, like integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. Say you're feeding salmon and stuff in here. Well, the nutrients are going to come off. Well, let that feed kelp, right? And mussels and sea cucumbers and all sorts of other stuff. So you don't have these externalities because externalities are stuff that happen outside of your system boundaries, and it causes things to happen that you don't account for and you might not want. And it's a wasted asset. It's underutilized, right? So when you overgraze, this is in the Aral Sea watershed, um, stuff can't get down. Instead, we need to look to nature. This is white oaks pastures. I mean, this is just beautiful. It mimics what herbivores would do in nature. They graze really dense, they're really close, but they always keep moving. And you let the land recover, you let it regenerate. It's just beautiful from the sky. You know, we have this huge area that's so degraded. We don't realize it because our baselines have become so diminished. We don't realize how abundant nature can be. And that's what I want to show you. It's not that complicated. You just need to understand certain things about system dynamics. And with modern technology, like we can fly over here with a drone and take these images of the lands that'll tell you like what different nutrient content is in here. It's amazing what the technology is available that we can do and the potential for it if it's applied with a higher purpose in mind and into the future. I would just really like to know what Nikola Tesla would think about all this and our capabilities now. And I'll digress. I could do a whole video on him. I really like him for his pigeon. I grew up with pigeons. Dad had about 500 of them in our backyard. Just fly them, amazing stuff. Yeah, I can tell you some stories on pigeons. We'll come back to that another day. But you know, Tesla was talking about this energy being so abundant all around us, and we just have to know how to tap into it. That means both electrically, but then also with matter, because energy flows and matter cycles. I'll do another video on this soon. But if you understand that, you have unlocked a lot of the keys to making this world a better place. The energy is always moving. It comes from the source, sun, cosmos. And this matter that we have is not created or destroyed. It just changes forms. And life transmutates all of these smaller pieces into higher complexity. And the resonance keeps going. It's just amazing to think about. And I truly think that we can enter the golden age, a place of primordial peace and harmony, stability, and prosperity. This is described by Plato. During this age of peace and harmony prevailed, people did not have to work to feed themselves. The earth provided food in abundance. Their ecosystems were not destroyed, and they just went, and they just could go out there and they could eat. They lived to a very old age, for the earth provided food in abundance. They lived to a very old age with a youthful appearance, eventually dying peacefully, with spirits living on as guardians. Plato, he recounts this golden age and the humans who came first. He didn't mean that it was like literally there's a bunch of gold around, but that it was just a beautiful time of harmony. And we can get back to there. And so these are some of the things that I want to focus on in this channel. I want to do live site designs. So especially as I get more efficient with this camera setup, I'm going to take sites. Feel free to send me a link or a map of a place of interest for you, and I'll dissect it. I'll tell you what I see and where opportunities are for a garden, for forestry, for a house, for a basketball court, a community center, all sorts of different things. That's what I'm interested in. And to make a lot of these concepts make sense, I want to break down a lot of this stuff, right? So we'll talk about thermodynamics, we'll talk about ecology, we'll talk about systems mapping, all sorts of stuff. I want to go around the world with y'all. And with technology, we have the ability to. So I'll pull up maps, we'll interact with it. Again, I'll tell you what I see and what is going to work and what might not. But also recognize that I don't have all the answers. I can point you in a direction, but true learning has to happen within. And there's going to be failure. But you just got to persist. Like in the garden, a radish in the summer, it takes like 25 days from seed to harvest. You can plant a whole bunch of radishes in a season. What about trees, fruit trees? They take a few years at least. So practice with radishes, practice with small ideas, get things out there, trial, fail, keep planting, learn, and those same patterns, they'll apply themselves for this longer term project or idea, or we can get there. You just have to think in the future. Right? And let's just grow. I mean, all of our issues we can solve. But you have to realize that life's potential, it rests in a seed. And it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to make this world into a place for our children and our children's children. And make this world a place that we can enjoy today. Something that's truly rewarding, that provides for us, that reduces exploitation, that encourages abundance. It's not telling people don't do bad. It's about showing people how we can do good. And that's what I think is missing a lot nowadays. It's how can we do good? Not less bad. We have this amazing capability. There's no reason that we should have any ecological issues, any economic issues. As things get more and more complex and complicated, obviously, there's many reasons that one can point to. But you have to take responsibility. You got to start small. It can grow from there. So with that, I'm going to conclude this first stream. Sorry again about the first part. I'm going to cut that out where the microphone wasn't working. But yeah, I'm going to mess with the lighting here. Sorry about that. And try and get a smoother setup. But I hope this gives you some insight into what this channel will be about. Some of my next videos that I'm planning on making. One, we'll do a general guide to growing. So if you have garden questions, let me know. I have sort of a basics cheat sheet going that I'll present to y'all. I'll talk about tilling and the soil. We're going to talk about systems. We'll talk about water. So from the whole water cycle to irrigation in your garden and all between. There's a video I'm really excited to make called the livestock paradox. Because on the one hand, livestock is the cause and responsible for much of the world's desertification, but it's our best tool to fix it. So with that, keep growing, my friends.